Chapter 9, Part 2 of the Life of Harriet Beecher Stowe, compiled from her letters and journals by her son Charles Edward Stowe. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9, Sunny Memories, 1853, Part 2. 2 days later, we bade farewell to Glasgow, overwhelmed with kindness to the last, and only oppressed by the thought of how little that was satisfactory we were able to give in return. Again we were in the railroad car and on our way to Edinburgh. A pleasant 2 hours' trip is this from Glasgow to Edinburgh. When the cars stopped at Linlithgow station, the name started us as out of a dream. In Edinburgh the cars stopped amid a crowd of people who had assembled to meet us. The Lord Provost met us at the door of the car and presented us to the magistracy of the city and the committees of the Edinburgh anti-slavery societies. The drab dresses and pure white bonnets of many friends were conspicuous among the dense moving crowd, as white doves seen against a dark cloud. Mr. S. and myself and our future hostess, Mrs. Wigham, entered the carriage with the Lord Provost, and away we drove, the crowd following with their shouts and cheers. I was inexpressibly touched and affected by this. While we were passing the monument of Scott, I felt an obsessive melancholy. What a moment life seems in the presence of the noble dead! What a momentary thing is art in all its beauty! Where are all those great souls that have created such an atmosphere of light about Edinburgh, and how little a space was given them to live and enjoy? We drove all over Edinburgh, up to the castle, to the university, to Holyrood, to the hospitals, and through many of the principal streets, amid shouts and smiles and greetings. Some boys amused me very much by their pertinacious attempts to keep up with the carriage. "Heck," says one of them, "that's her. See the coils?" The various engravers who have amused themselves by diversifying my face for the public, having all with great unanimity agreed in giving prominence to this point, I suppose the urchins thought they were on safe ground there. I certainly think I answered one good purpose that day, and that is of giving the much oppressed and calumniated class called boys an opportunity to develop all the noise that was in them, a thing for which I think they must bless me in their remembrances. At last the carriage drove into a deep gravelled yard, and we alighted at a porch covered with green ivy, and found ourselves once more at home. You may spare your anxieties about me, for I do assure you that if I were an old Sèvres china jar, I could not have more careful handling than I do. Everybody is considerate, a great deal to say when there appears to be so much excitement. Everybody seems to understand how good for nothing I am, and yet, with all this consideration, I have been obliged to keep my room and bed for a good part of the time. Of the multitudes who have called, I have seen scarcely any. To-morrow evening is to be a great tea-party here. How in the world I am ever to live through it, I don't know. The amount of letters we found waiting for us here in Edinburgh was, if possible, more appalling than in Glasgow. Among those from persons whom you would be interested in hearing of, I may mention a very kind and beautiful one from the Duchess of Sutherland, and one also from the Earl of Carlisle, both desiring to make appointments for meeting us as soon as we come to London. Also a very kind and interesting note from the Reverend Mr. Kingsley and lady. I look forward with a great deal of interest to passing a little time with them in their rectory. As to all engagements, I am in a state of happy acquiescence, having resigned myself, as a very tame lion, into the hands of my keepers. Whenever the time comes for me to do anything, I try to behave as well as I can, which, as Dr. Young says, is all that an angel could do under the circumstances. April 26th. Last night came off the soirée. The hall was handsomely decorated with flags in front. We went with the Lord Provost in his carriage. We went up, as before, into a dressing-room, where I was presented to many gentlemen and ladies. When we go in, the cheering, clapping, and stamping at first strikes one with a strange sensation, but then everybody looks so heartily pleased and delighted, and there is such an all-pervading atmosphere of geniality and sympathy as makes me in a few moments feel quite at home. After all, I consider that these cheers and applauses are Scotland's voice to America, a recognition of the brotherhood of the countries. The national penny offering, consisting of 1,000 golden sovereigns on a magnificent silver salver, stood conspicuously in view of the audience. It has been an unsolicited offering, given in the smallest sums, often from the extreme poverty of the giver. The committee who collected it in Edinburgh and Glasgow bore witness to the willingness with which the very poorest contributed the offering of their sympathy. In one cottage they found a blind woman and said, "Here at last is one who will feel no interest, as she cannot have read the book." "Indeed," said the old lady, "if I cannot read, my son has read it to me, and I've got my pennies saved to give." It is to my mind extremely touching to see how the poor, in their poverty, can be moved to a generosity surpassing that of the rich. Nor do I mourn that they took it from their slender store, because I know that a penny given from a kindly impulse is a greater comfort and blessing to the poorest giver than even a penny received. As in the case of the other meeting, we came out long before the speeches were ended. Well, of course, I did not sleep all night, and the next day I felt quite miserable. From Edinburgh we took cars for Aberdeen. I enjoyed this ride more than anything we had seen yet. The country was so wild and singular. In the afternoon we came in sight of the German Ocean. The free, bracing air from the sea, and the thought that it actually was the German Ocean, and that over the other side was Norway, within a day's sail of us, gave it a strange, romantic charm. It was toward the close of the afternoon that we found ourselves crossing the Dee in view of Aberdeen. My spirits were wonderfully elated. The grand scenery and fine, bracing air, the noble, distant view of the city, rising with its harbor and shipping, all filled me with delight. In this propitious state, disposed to be pleased with everything, our hearts responded warmly to the greetings of the many friends who were waiting for us at the station house. The Lord Provost received us in his carriage, and as we drove along, pointed out to us the various objects of interest in the beautiful town. Among other things, a fine old bridge across the Dundee attracted our particular attention. We were conducted to the house of Mr. Cruikshank, a friend, and found waiting for us there the thoughtful hospitality which we had ever experienced in all our stopping places. A snug little quiet supper was laid out upon the table, of which we partook in haste, as we were informed that the assembly at the hall were waiting to receive us. They arrived, we found the hall crowded, and with difficulty made our way to the platform. Whether owing to the stimulating effect of the air from the ocean, or to the comparatively social aspect of the scene, or perhaps to both, certain it is that we enjoyed the meeting with great zest. I was surrounded on the stage with blooming young ladies, one of whom put into my hands a beautiful bouquet, some flowers of which I have now dried in my album. The refreshment tables were adorned with some exquisite wax flowers, the work, as I was afterwards told, of a young lady in the place. One of these designs especially interested me. It was a group of water lilies resting on a mirror, which gave them the appearance of growing in the water. We had some very animated speaking, in which the speakers contrived to blend enthusiastic admiration and love for America with detestation of slavery. They presented an offering in a beautiful embroidered purse, and after much shaking of hands we went home, and sat down to the supper table for a little more chat before going to bed. The next morning, as we had only till noon to stay in Aberdeen, our friends, the Lord Provost and Mr. Leslie, the architect, came immediately after breakfast to show us the place. About 2 o'clock we started from Aberdeen, among crowds of friends to whom we bade farewell with real regret. At Stonehaven station, where we stopped a few minutes, there was quite a gathering of the inhabitants to exchange greetings, and afterwards, at successive stations along the road, many a kindly face and voice made our journey a pleasant one. When we got into Dundee, it seemed all alive with welcome. We went in the carriage with Lord Provost, Mr. Toms, to his residence, where a party had been waiting dinner for us for some time. The meeting in the evening was in a large church, densely crowded, and conducted much as the others had been. When they came to sing the closing hymn, I hoped they would sing Dundee, but they did not, and I fear in Scotland, as elsewhere, the characteristic national melodies are giving way before more modern ones. We left Dundee at 2 o'clock, by cars, for Edinburgh again, and in the evening attended another soirée of the working men of Edinburgh. We have received letters from the working men, both in Dundee and Glasgow, desiring our return to attend soirées in those cities. Nothing could give us greater pleasure, had we time or strength. The next day we had a few calls to make, and an invitation from Lady Drummond to visit classic Hawthornden, which, however, we had not time to accept. In the forenoon Mr. S. and I called on Lord and Lady Gainsborough. Though she is one of the Queen's household, she is staying here in Edinburgh while the Queen is at Osborne. I infer, therefore, that the appointment includes no very onerous duties. The Earl of Gainsborough is the eldest brother of the Reverend Baptist W. Noel. It was a rainy, misty morning when I left my kind retreat and friends in Edinburgh. Considerate as everybody had been about imposing on my time or strength, still you may well believe that I was much exhausted. We left Edinburgh, therefore, with the determination to plunge at once into some hidden and unknown spot where we might spend 2 or 3 days quietly by ourselves, and remembering your Sunday at Stratford-on-Avon, I proposed that we should go there. As Stratford, however, is off the railroad line, we determined to accept the invitation which was lying by us from our friend Joseph Sturge of Birmingham, and take sanctuary with him. So we rode on, entrusting him with the secret, and charging him on no account to let anyone know of our arrival. About night our cars whizzed into the depot at Birmingham, but just before we came in a difficulty was started in the company. Mr. Sturge is to be there waiting for us, but he does not know us, and we don't know him. What is to be done? C. insisted that he should know him by instinct, and so, after we reached the depot, we told him to sally out and try. Sure enough, in a few moments he pitched upon a cheerful, middle-aged gentleman, with a moderate but not decisive broad brim to his hat, and challenged him as Mr. Sturge. The result verified the truth that instinct is a great matter. In a few moments our new friend and ourselves were snugly encased in a fly, trotting off as briskly as ever we could to his place at Edgbaston, nobody a whit the wiser. You do not know how pleased we felt to think we had done it so nicely. As we were drinking tea that evening, Elihu Burritt came in. It was the first time I had ever seen him, though I had heard a great deal of him from our friends in Edinburgh. He is a man in middle life, tall and slender, with fair complexion, blue eyes, an air of delicacy and refinement, and manners of great gentleness. My ideas of the learned blacksmith had been of something altogether more ponderous and peremptory. Elihu had been for some years operating, in England and on the Continent, in a movement which many in our half-Christianized times regard with as much incredulity as the grim old warlike barons did the suspicious imbecilities of reading and writing. The sword now, as then, seems so much more direct a way to terminate controversies, that many Christian men even cannot conceive how the world is to get along without it. We spent the evening in talking over various topics relating to the anti-slavery movement. Mr. Sturge was very confident that something more was to be done than had ever been done yet, by combinations for the encouragement of free in the place of slave-grown produce, a question which has, ever since the days of Clarkson, more or less deeply occupied the minds of abolitionists in England. I should say that Mr. Sturge and his family has for many years conscientiously forborne the use of any article produced by slave labor. I could scarcely believe it possible that there could be such an abundance and variety of all that is comfortable and desirable in the various departments of household living within these limits. Mr. Sturge presents the subject with great force, the more so from the consistency of his example. The next morning, as we were sitting down to breakfast, our friend sent in to me a plate of the largest, finest strawberries I have ever seen, which, considering that it was only the latter part of April, seemed to me quite an astonishing luxury. Before we left, we had agreed to meet a circle of friends from Birmingham, consisting of the Abolition Society there, which is, of course, long-standing, extending back in its memories to the very commencement of the agitation under Clarkson and Wilberforce. The windows of the parlor were opened to the ground, and the company invited filled not only the room, but stood in a crowd on the grass around the window. Among the peaceable company present was an admiral in the navy, a fine, cheerful old gentleman, who entered with hearty interest into the scene. A throng of friends accompanied us to the depot, while from Birmingham we had the pleasure of the company of Elihu Burritt, and enjoyed a delightful run to London, where we arrived towards evening. At the station house in London we found the Reverend Messrs. Binney and Sherman waiting for us with carriages. C. went with Mr. Sherman, and Mr. S. and I soon found ourselves in a charming retreat called Rose Cottage in Walworth, about which I will tell you more anon. Mrs. B. received us with every attention which the most thoughtful hospitality could suggest. One of the first things she said to me after we got into our rooms was, "Oh, we are so glad you have come, for we are all going to the Lord Mayor's dinner to-night, and you are invited." So, though I was tired, I hurried to dress in all the glee of meeting an adventure. As soon as Mr. and Mrs. B. and the rest of the party were ready, crack went the whip, round went the wheels, and away we drove. We found a considerable throng, and I was glad to accept a seat which was offered me in the agreeable vicinity of the Lady Mayoress, so that I might see what would be interesting to me of the ceremonial. A very dignified gentleman, dressed in black velvet, with a fine head, made his way through the throng, and sat down by me, introducing himself as Lord Chief Baron Pollock. He told me he had just been reading the legal part of my Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, and remarked especially on the opinion of Judge Ruffin in the case of State versus Man as having made a deep impression on his mind. Dinner was announced between 9 and 10 o'clock, and we were conducted into a splendid hall where the tables were laid. Directly opposite me was Mr. Dickens, whom I now beheld for the first time, and was surprised to see looking so young. Mr. Justice Talfourd, known as the author of Ion, was also there with his lady. She had a beautiful antique cast of head. The Lord Mayor was simply dressed in black, without any other adornment than a massive gold chain. We rose from the table between 11 and 12 o'clock, that is, we ladies, and went into the drawing-room, where I was presented to Mrs. Dickens and several other ladies. Mrs. Dickens is a good specimen of a truly English woman, tall, large, and well-developed, with fine, healthy color and an air of frankness, cheerfulness, and reliability. A friend whispered to me that she was as observing and fond of humor as her husband. After a while the gentlemen came back to the drawing-room, and I had a few moments of very pleasant, friendly conversation with Mr. Dickens. They are both people that one could not know a little of without desiring to know more. After a little we began to talk of separating, the Lord Mayor to take his seat in the House of Commons, and the rest of the party to any other engagement that might be upon their list. "Come, let us go to the House of Commons," said one of my friends, "and make a night of it." "With all my heart," replied I, "if I only had another body to go into to-morrow." What a convenience in sight-seeing it would be if only one could have a relay of bodies as of clothes, and slip from one into the other. But we, not used to the London style of turning night into day, are full weary already. So, good night to you all. End of Chapter 9, Part 2. End of chapter 9. Read for you by Michelle Fry, Baton Rouge, Louisiana.